We're continuing on this week with Skill Area 7 and wrapping up this semester. So this is again about out-of-school environments, and this week we're going to talk about how do we use those environments to teach. So we know that your environment contributes to program quality, and your anchor this week asks you how that is. And what I hope you'll be thinking about is how you might be able to make it contribute more to your program's quality. Just quickly reviewing, last week we looked at environmental factors that have to do with the environment and how we might adapt those factors to move one way or the other on each of those continuum. But there's still more. If you want your environment to act, as I think it can, as an extra teacher. Well, that's an interesting notion. All of us would like to have an extra body in our programs to teach kids, and so let's think about how does the environment teach? Well, I think there are lots of different ways, but I think one way that the environment teaches, or these are a few ways actually that the environment teaches expectations and behavior. It teaches social skills, and it supports and inspires academic learning. And I'm going to challenge you to think about what else your environment might be teaching. And is it teaching the kinds of things that you really want kids to learn? I've been in some environments where what kids were learning, I think, was that they weren't particularly valued, that the environment was not necessarily clean or organized for children or more child-friendly or particularly well kept up. Well, that teaches kids something too. We want our environment to teach kids that they are very valued and appreciated and that we want them to learn. So let's take a look at each of the ways I think the environment teaches. So expectations and behaviors we'll start with. I think certainly kids can learn boundaries and limits and rules from the environments. Now boundaries, they can be learned from how you arrange the furniture or the equipment that you have and how you space that out. We've talked a bit about that already. But it can also help kids learn limits and rules. And so I have a number of photographs here of some rules that have been posted in programs. So I like this one particularly because it ties back to what we talked about in Skill Area 6, where we're creating a social contract. And you notice that this picture is about the rules for the staff and the consequences for the staff that the children came up with. The children were obviously involved in that. They each got that strip of construction paper that they got to paste onto the consequences and the rules poster. There's one of those for the children as well, and they were also involved in that part of the process. I just like that tie back to that social contract to remember that it's a two-way process. This one, the kids were posting some stuff up too, but it created a kind of a collage about this particular program, which is After School in the Park. Kind of a nice way to make it their own kind of poster. This is a program that's in a shared space. They have to bring this poster out all the time, every single time, so they put it on a kind of a hard format so that they could do that easily and prop it up on their fireplace mantle, actually, is where they have that. And here's another one that has a photograph now of a child or a drawing of a child, and the staff, it looks like adult writing there. I think the staff listened to what children were saying about how kids wanted to be, and then what were the appropriate ways for them to behave, and then what were the ways that they wished that they would not behave. And so children again were involved in that part of the process. So this environment taught kids the process for creating limits and rules, but also gave them a visual reminder, and that continues to teach them about those limits and rules. In another program that I visit, this was not done by the children, but it still creates a very nice opportunity to look at behavior and expectations. So in this particular program, they're using a full rainbow. Now, some programs that I go to use a red, yellow, and green process, and that red, yellow, and green process is, if you're red, you're probably going to be suspended from the program. If you're yellow, this is a real warning. You need to know that. And then green is this is good behavior. I really liked this approach a little bit better than that because everybody starts on the green, which is usually the case in the red, yellow, green process too. But not only do we have the yellow and the red on the outside of the circle where that indicates that this is dangerous behavior, this is behavior that we don't want to see with kids, there's also opportunity to do exceptionally good behavior, and that we can be a true blue champ, or we can be right on target, and so we can be even higher than this normal green good behavior that we expect from kids. We want to encourage kids to go beyond. And to be extra kind, extra nice to people, extra caring for others. So I thought that was a nice twist on this to really encourage kids to be additionally kind beyond the normal expectations of kindness. Now, in yet another program, they use these table tents to define each of their centers, and then they cue the kids to the behavior that's expected at that particular center. Now that's very useful because centers have, kids have different expectations of behavior in different places, and they know that, but it's good to remind them about that. So here's the way the table tents work, and the diagram up at the top will show you, this is kind of looking at it from the side, that there are two pieces of paper that are joined at the top with a staple and at the bottom with another piece of paper or cardboard that kind of holds them up into a tent. So here's an example of one that they had in their construction zone. And then the kids were instructed to create rules that were particularly relevant to the construction zone. Now, it turns out this is a Y program, and the Y values of respect, responsibility, honesty, and caring were the framework that the staff provided for the children to help them think about how they would demonstrate those values in this particular center. And that's a really useful way for them to be thinking about how they behave here. And so, it's not necessarily going to be a normal rule everywhere in the program that they shouldn't try to break, throw, or kick the toys. It's probably not going to be relevant in a variety of places like the homework center or maybe even the snack center. And so this is a rule that's completely relevant to this particular place. And that helps make it more concrete for kids about how they should behave in this particular space. So I really like this notion of thinking about our limits and rules in sort of center-based kinds of ways. Now, the other nice thing about this table tent then is that it creates a little bit of a visual reminder. The construction zone on the front of the table tent, the rules on the back, so it's right there. And it's also attractive. It creates a break in a flat table space or even on a rug space if the space was there. So the kids have a chance to have something attractive and visual to remind them about how they should be behaving. So to teach expectations then, we have a variety of things that we might be able to do. And so here are some things I think we could make better use of often, and that's to get kids involved, not just in teaching the expectations, not just in creating the rules, but also in helping to post those rules and consequences and make sure that we do have this visual reminder, even if we have to put it up every single day. So then we don't always have to holler at a kid to change his or her behavior. All we have to do is to, give a little wiggle of our finger to get them to come to us, walk them over to the poster, and point to the spot where they may be having needing a reminder about how to behave, and that becomes an easier way for them to accept that correction in behavior. We can also post problem-solving processes, so we can help kids know what to do with the process of solving a problem and what those steps might be. And we can use those center-based rules, so it's more specific and more concrete for kids. And we can make it artful. You know, the colors on the top poster that you see here, which is where the participants' rules are and the participant consequences. The colorfulness makes a difference, and it makes us pay attention in a different kind of way. So we do want to make it artful. And as we're thinking about what else we might do, we can think about what else we could do to help our space teach behavioral expectations. And I'm going to challenge you to think about that, and that will be one of the questions that will be part of your away this week. To how can you more effectively use your environment to teach the expectations for behavior that you really want to see in the program? The environment also teaches social skills. And here are the specific things that I think it really can do a great job with. I think the environment can and should help children learn some self-awareness and to help them have conversational practice and to create a sense of belonging and a sense of independence. So let's think about self-awareness first. Well, I think posters are a great way to help kids learn some self-awareness. So if they can understand their emotions by looking at a photograph or even an icon, even a happy face that's maybe happy or not so happy, to see a range of emotions, a range of feelings, that adds to their self-awareness. And I think personally this, because our programs are so focused on social skills, if you don't have this kind of poster in your program, I'd say that's one of the things you put on your wish list and you try to make happen pretty soon. To help kids understand that they can be a whole lot more than just happy or sad or mad. They can also be excited and guilty and loved and sorry and surprised and a whole range of emotions. And posters can also help kids figure out what to do with those feelings. So in this program they identified that the feelings come in sizes, and sometimes the kids are able to handle a sort of a annoyed feeling, but they maybe need to have some help with an angry or a furious feeling. And so, this helps them know what to do with stuff. And obviously, this one looks like it was probably helped, at least partially developed by children as well. So they had a chance to be part of the learning visually and then have this visual reminder. Again, we can use those center-based rules, and here's another one of those table tents, and they can foster conversational practice. So in this particular notion, we can encourage kids to chat about the rules at the snack table, and they chatted obviously about these rules when they helped to create the rules. And we can use our walls to teach, so they can teach self-awareness. I love this notion, and this wasn't even on a wall. Actually, this was on a back of a door. And these were self-portraits that the kindergarten kids drew at the beginning of the year, and then they would draw another one at the end of the year. And interesting to see not just how they perceived themselves to change over that year, but what the level of skill in the drawing and the hand-eye coordination that might have happened there. It's again a way to help them see that self-awareness and to see how much they've grown over that year. And really fun, really cute photographs or pictures of what they can do. We can also use the walls to teach a sense of belonging. So probably a lot of you have some photographs up someplace in your program. I'd encourage you to have even more of those. And this one, just a simple opportunity to demonstrate what kids have been doing, and to maybe create a scrapbook that is always out and available for kids to look through so they can see themselves and remind themselves of the things that they've done in the program, and to foster this sense of belonging that they're part of that program so they see photographs of themselves. It's also a great way to help parents and families know what we've been doing to post these photographs, and by all means, they're going to be looking for pictures of their own kids. And we can also use the walls to teach independence. So I like this particular photograph of again, this was a kindergarten program, and they had jobs listed up there, and then you might see the jobs are in the sort of the blackboard slate kind of poster thing that went on the wall, and then each child had a laminated star and a little piece of Velcro, so they got to move their jobs around in various places. But then all they had to do to remember what their job was, what their particular chore of that day was to look up at the wall, and they could remember. And at the same time, they're practicing their reading, they're practicing that sight recognition, and that's a really good notion for kids to do. So what can we do to help kids teach social skills and help our environment teach those social skills to kids? Well, I think we can use a feelings poster. I think that's a great thing to do. I think we can post our rules and consequences and create a sense of belonging art like those self-portraits. I think we could create a talk it out center, which I've seen pretty used effectively, or a peace table where kids who maybe are having conflict know that there's a place that they can go, and they're going to get some reminders about how to resolve that conflict, how to manage that, and have a chance to talk that out, and they know what the behavior expectations are there, so they can use it to calm down if they chose to do that. And then how else might we teach social skills? And that will again be part of your away for this week. How can you more effectively use your environment to teach social skills? And the last thing I'm going to talk about in terms of how the environment teaches is how it supports and inspires academic learning. So I think one of the key ways that we do that is through print richness. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. And we also want to have books and magazines and poetry and words of the day, words of the week, whatever it might be. We ought to have a science lab area, again, even if we have to set it up every day, or a dramatic play area. All of those kinds of things help kids manage language, manage science, learn math. All of these kinds of opportunities, again, the walls can teach. So let's start by looking at print rich. So you can use a word of the day or a riddle of the day or a poem of the day. And you know, a poem doesn't have to be one of those kid-based lyrics and limericks or something. It can also be something that is a little bit more advanced, because poetry really brings down it sort of hones down and sharpens to the absolute core of emotions and feelings, and this is a great way for kids to learn this. This obviously was not on a poster. It was created by the staff who were in this program, and it happens to be a young woman who's very interested in her own African heritage and has kids of African heritage and other cultural heritage is represented in her program as well. And I think during the Black History Month, she had this posted up. But it was obviously something that she felt personally strong about, and the kids reacted to it positively as well. So there's not any vocabulary there that probably was challenging for the kids, or if it was, then it became something they could learn in context, and also it was talked about. So deferred maybe was difficult, or fester was difficult, but it was something that was useful to talk about. So classic kind of poem by Langston Hughes, and we can expose kids to that opportunity. It reminds me also of another program where the kids are learning snips from Shakespeare, and those are just written out on a 3x5 card and kept in a box, and then the kids pull those out, read them, and then perform them. So, you know, bubble, 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 toil and trouble. And the kids love to put on their witch's costume so they can perform that particular snip from a Shakespeare play. Well, the kids can do this kind of stuff, and it becomes really exciting and fun for them. You can also use quotes of the day, and I just have a few of them out here that I really like, or quotes of the week, or we can ask kids to come up with those kinds of things, and again put them on our walls, so that we can really again have lots of opportunities for kids to get sight recognition of words. Now, again, this is not expensive. It's not anything that's terribly difficult. So we can use more of these opportunities for kids to do that. Now, I think one of the reasons that print richness is so important is that kids are getting this almost unconscious practice in reading. And we know that reading is foundational to academic success. I remember being in a program once where the kids were waiting before dismissal, and they're all just sitting there, and they were sitting not in what I didn't consider a particularly appropriate way necessarily, but they happened to be sitting in a room where there was a lot of stuff for them to look at and a lot of print materials. And I remember watching one little guy. He's sitting there in his coat with his backpack on, sitting in a chair waiting for dismissal, and he looked bored for a minute, but then he started to look around the room, and I saw his eyes track this poster about reading, and he was reading that whole poster. Yay, this kid was practicing his reading, and this is what kids need to do. So the more words we have up around the room, around our spaces, the more opportunities they have to get that practice, and that matters. So we want to take advantage of that. We can also tap into visual learning. I love this project. It happened to be about bridges when the kids were going to construct a bridge, but it connected pictures of actual bridges in the Rochester area or other bridges that might be familiar to them that they might have seen. And then it also had the opportunity then for the kids to develop a hypothesis about the bridge that they were constructing with straws, and they were going to see how many pennies that straw bridge or the toothpick bridge would be able to hold. And then they would have opportunities to demonstrate what their observations were and then the results of what actually happened. So this was a way to tap into visual learning. We know that some kids learn better when they see something. So not only was this a science experiment, but then they were actually having this print-rich experience as well, where they were visually learning and learning words like hypothesis and observations and what those were and what those words mean. And we can use our parent or family center as well, again, to have that opportunity for kids to track the language and the words that might appear on that display. We can use a variety of displays to do that kind of thing. And remember that our environment doesn't just include our space, it also includes routine and relationships. And here's a routine that I'd really recommend to you. This is one that is done in a YMCA program, and they call it ROW, which stands for Reading on Wednesdays. So every Wednesday in this program, either the staff read to a group of kids or kids read on their own for about 20 minutes. And so the kids know this is an expectation, and the kids the kids have access to a lot of books, and that's really important in our environment as well. But they also can bring a book from home, or they can bring a library book from school. They can, again, be in a group where they're being read to, or perhaps a child is reading to that group, or they can read on their own. I think you can see a little guy at the table beyond up in the right hand corner. He's just doing his own reading. But it's in a way to encourage that, and everybody does that. Now, the staff choose a variety of books, so we have some picture books based on the ages of the children, but we also have some chapter books that are being read. And it's really great for kids to have read alouds. When we're reading a book to children, they can understand vocabulary at a higher level than they could probably read it for themselves. And that stimulates them and it makes a good learning environment. So reading on Wednesdays, it's just a remarkable thing, and this program is huge. This is a program that has 90 kids in it and in one big cafeteria. The ugly cafeteria, as a matter of fact, that I referred to last week. And but you see the kids get in groups of 3 or 4 or 7 or 9 or 10 or sometimes 15 or 20, or on their own, and everybody's reading for this 20 minutes of their program. It's a lovely thing to see. We can also make sure that we make an effort to post kids' art and their writing. So we can ask kids to write paragraphs. Again, they're creating their own print-rich materials and practicing writing, but also having a chance to see it up there. And we can connect to school initiatives. In a school that I've visited often, I noticed as I walked around the hallways, there were photographs outside of every classroom, photograph of the teacher. These happened to be 8 by 10 photographs in color, and that teacher was holding one of his or her favorite books. They also had it for the cafeteria staff. The cafeteria staff were all photographed there, and they were photographed holding one of their favorite books. Well, what a cool thing. The whole school where this program is hosted is into sharing what their favorite books are. Great visual opportunity for kids to see that adults like to read too. Well, I was working with this YMCA program that's hosted in the school, and I said, I think you've got an opportunity here. And so they eventually, took them quite a while, but eventually they also took photographs of their staff, and every staff was holding one of their favorite books. And then they had an opportunity then to mat that and make it look like art and post it and keep it up. In this particular school, it was an interesting thing. Their PTA would take charge of the bulletin board in that cafeteria, and a lot of times when the Y would put things up and post things up, then the next day they might be gone because the PTA had decided they shouldn't have that there. These photographs of staff holding their favorite book, which connected to something that the school was also doing, made the Y staff part of the school, and those photographs stayed right up there. And they looked like art, so nobody took them down. So that's one of the ways that we want to really negotiate with schools to connect with what does the school see as important? What's a great opportunity for them? And I loved this way that the staff was able to finally connect. We can also teach language, vocabulary, by using labels. But let's not start with just teaching English vocabulary. Let's teach Spanish and Chinese and Swahili and any language that you might have that might connect with the cultures in your program or connect with a theme that you're doing for a particular week or a particular month. Let's use as many languages as we can to help kids again get that sight recognition and to expand their cultural awareness so that they recognize that the language they speak is not the language that everyone speaks. And they're getting some help in learning how to spell a tough word like scissors in the meantime. We should have everything that's labeled, that has a potential for being labeled. We should have labels on that. And that, serves us well too, because then kids know where to put things back, and they can easily be reminded. They'll look for the label. That's where you put that. So again, they're getting reading practice and sight recognition there. So some things that we can do to support and inspire learning, well, we can label things. I think that's one of the easiest things we can do and one of the quickest things we can make happen. And we can make sure that we do that in multiple languages. And you know, there are lots of translating programs that are available online. Babelfish or translator.com will give you a variety of different vocabulary words, and the words that we're going to use are pretty simple, so they're likely to be easy to find. We can use quotes and poetry, and we can read and write everywhere. A great idea that I gained from going to a conference myself last year was to turn just plain cardboard into a clipboard. We all like to have a clipboard. It makes us feel kind of important and official. But if you just use one of those big paper clips, one of those sort of claw type clips, and you connect that to a piece of cardboard, instant paper clip, or instant clipboard rather, and you can make those in a variety of sizes, and then you can have those kinds of clipboards everywhere. So you can read and write everywhere, and that creates a much more print-rich environment. We also ought to have a STEM center and lab. Let me tell you about one that I've seen. In this program, it's a dedicated program, so they don't have to set it up every day, but other programs maybe choose one day of the week to do that. But this particular program sets up a science center, and they have the scientific method and the steps generally that kids will go through of making an educated guess and hypothesis about what might happen, to predict what might happen, to try something out, and so they give us simple directions on how to do that, and then to figure out what the results were and what those results mean. So that basic process is posted, and it's always there. And then they put up an experiment of the week, or experiment of every couple of days. And the kids in this program have a lot of free choice, and they choose when they're going to do that experiment. But it's always available to them, and it's always something that's pretty new, maybe something they haven't done before. So a STEM center or a lab kind of setup is great. Another program that I know uses, they like words a lot. Excuse me. And so they have Sci-Fri. So on Friday they do science activities. Now they're in a cafeteria. They can't have things set up all the time. It's not appropriate for them to necessarily do science every single day, but they sure can once a week. It's a good opportunity to do that. Excuse me again. And creating learning routines like row, reading on Wednesdays, or any other kind of learning opportunity, that's really great. But please, please, please look at your program and your space and see how print rich is it, and what could you do to increase that print richness, and what could you do to increase the opportunities for dramatic play, because kids are learning language in that dramatic play as well. And your way is going to be, again, thinking about how could you do more? What could you do to be more effective in using your environment to support and inspire learning? So these are just a few ways that I think that the environment teaches. I want you to think about some other ways that you might be able to use that environment, again, as an extra teacher. If you think really carefully about your environment, you'll find that your expectations about behavior will probably increase, and kids' behavior will match that increased expectation. The kids will learn more social skills, and they will become more ready and inspired to learn in a variety of different ways. And that's having that extra teacher. So your way this time around is to think of 3 ways that you could shift your environment and your program space to help it teach more effectively. And thinking about expectations, thinking about social skills, thinking about environment, and supporting and inspiring learning, and thinking about other ways that you might be able to help kids learn by using your environment.